settler's wife whispers defiance into the face of a Comanche chief, and his smirk changes everything. What happens next will test courage, loyalty, and the line between fear and fascination. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Montana Territory stretched out before Sarah Mitchell like an endless sea of grass, golden in the late afternoon sun. At 23, she had never imagined she would find herself on the edge of the frontier, hundreds of miles from her Boston home. The wooden walls of their newly constructed cabin offered little protection against the howling wind that swept across the plains. Her husband Thomas had dragged her west with promises of land and opportunity, after the Civil War left them with few prospects back east. "We'll make something of ourselves here," Thomas had insisted, his eyes gleaming with the fervor of a man possessed by dreams of prosperity. Sarah sighed as she hung the last of their laundry on the line. 3 months on this barren patch of earth, and Thomas's promises seemed as empty as the vast sky above them. Their nearest neighbors were 5 miles away, and the small trading post required a full day's journey by horse. "Thomas, did you fix that loose board on the north side?" Sarah called out, knowing her husband was tending to their meager crops. When no answer came, Sarah frowned and shielded her eyes against the setting sun. The field stood empty, the hoe abandoned by the half-finished row of corn. A flicker of worry ignited in her chest. "Thomas?" she called again, louder this time. The distant sound of hoofbeats made her turn. Relief flooded her veins until she realized it wasn't a single rider approaching, but several. As they drew closer, her blood ran cold. Not settlers or soldiers, but Comanche warriors. 5 of them, their faces painted for war. Sarah's hands trembled as she backed toward the cabin, her mind racing. The Indians of these parts had been mostly peaceful lately, but stories of raids and violence still circulated among the settlers. She reached the porch just as they reined their horses to a stop 20 yards from her home. The leader dismounted with fluid grace. He was tall, with copper skin weathered by the elements and piercing dark eyes that missed nothing. Unlike the others, he wore a mixture of traditional clothing and items clearly traded from white settlers. A cavalry officer's jacket over buckskin leggings, and a single eagle feather in his long black hair. "Where is your husband, woman?" His English was clear but heavily accented. Sarah swallowed hard. He's gone to the trading post. He'll return soon with others." The lie felt brittle on her tongue. The Comanche chief's eyes narrowed, scanning the property before returning to her face. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "You lie poorly," he said. "The tracks show a man walked into the trees hours ago. Alone." Fear clutched at Sarah's throat, but something deeper. A stubborn pride passed down from generations of Mitchell women who had survived hardship and loss, rose within her. "What do you want here?" she demanded, straightening her spine. The chief raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her boldness. His companions shifted restlessly on their horses. "Your husband has been hunting on sacred lands," he said. "He killed a white buffalo calf. This is forbidden." Sarah's heart sank. Thomas had indeed returned with a rare, pale-hided buffalo calf 2 days prior, boasting of his exceptional kill. She had warned him against venturing too far into Comanche territory, but as always, he had dismissed her concerns. "If my husband has wronged your people, he should answer for it," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I had no part in it." The chief studied her for a long moment. Behind him, one of the younger warriors said something in Comanche, and the others laughed. Sarah felt her cheeks burn, though she couldn't understand their words. "I am Swift River," the chief finally said. "Your husband has committed a grave offense. He must make amends, or there will be consequences for all who settle on these lands." Sarah's fingers curled into fists at her sides. "You don't scare me," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Swift River's expression shifted from stern to amused. He smirked, the gesture making him suddenly seem younger, less formidable. "Courage is admirable," he said. "Foolishness is not. Tell your husband Swift River came. Tell him we will return when the moon is full again. He will provide 5 horses as payment for his transgression, or he will face our justice." With that, he mounted his horse in one fluid motion. As the Comanche prepared to leave, The sound of a gunshot cracked through the air. Swift River's horse reared, nearly throwing him, as Thomas emerged from the tree line, rifle in hand. "Get away from my wife and my property," Thomas shouted, his face contorted with rage and fear. "Thomas, don't," Sarah cried. But it was too late. Her husband was already reloading for another shot. Swift River's expression hardened. He barked an order to his men, who quickly knocked arrows to their bows. Sarah lunged forward, placing herself between the warriors and her husband. "Please," she said to Swift River, her eyes meeting his. "There's been enough bloodshed on this frontier. Let us resolve this peacefully." Time stretched between them like a taut rope. Finally, Swift River nodded once. "One moon," he said. "5 horses, or blood will answer for blood." As they rode away, Sarah turned to Thomas, fury replacing her fear. "You fool! You could have gotten us both killed." Thomas spat on the ground. "I won't be threatened by savages on my own land." "It was their land first," Sarah retorted, surprising herself with the thought. "And you killed something sacred to them." "That's nonsense. It was just a buffalo." Sarah shook her head, watching the dust cloud kicked up by the departing Comanche. Something told her this wouldn't be the last she'd see of Swift River, and strangely, the thought didn't terrify her as much as it should. 2 weeks passed with tension hanging over the Mitchell homestead like a thundercloud. Thomas had grown increasingly agitated, spending long hours patrolling their property with his rifle in hand and jumping at shadows. He refused to even consider Swift River's demand for 5 horses. "We don't have 5 horses to give," he had snapped when Sarah suggested they try to trade for them at the settlement. "And I won't bow to threats from those savages." Sarah found herself growing increasingly frustrated with her husband's stubbornness. The Thomas she had married in Boston had been gentle and full of dreams. The frontier had hardened him, turned him bitter and quick to anger. On this particular morning, Sarah was gathering water from the creek when she felt a presence behind her. She turned slowly, water bucket in hand, to find Swift River watching her from atop his painted pony. "You're alone," she observed, surprised to find her voice steady. "As are you," he replied. "Your husband seems unwise to leave his brave wife unprotected." There was something in his tone, not mockery but genuine respect, that made Sarah set down her bucket. "Thomas is trading pelts at the settlement. We need supplies." She hesitated before adding, "We don't have 5 horses." Swift River dismounted, keeping a respectful distance. "I know this. I have watched your homestead." The admission should have frightened her, but instead, Sarah felt a curious sense of relief. Someone had been watching over them, even if for purposes of their own. "Then you know we can't meet your demand." Swift River nodded. "There are other ways to make amends." He reached into a pouch at his waist and withdrew something wrapped in soft leather. The white buffalo calf was sacred. Its spirit must be honored. He extended the package toward her. After a moment's hesitation, Sarah accepted it, carefully unwrapping the leather to reveal a small, carved fetish of a buffalo made from white stone. "This is beautiful," she murmured, running her finger over the smooth surface. "It must be placed where the calf's life was taken, with proper offerings of tobacco and cornmeal." Swift River's dark eyes held hers. "Your husband will not do this, but you might." Sarah studied the carving in her palm. "Why would you trust me with this?" "Because you spoke of peace when your husband chose violence. Because you understand respect." A hint of that smirk appeared again. "And because you are not afraid." Sarah couldn't help the small smile that touched her lips. "I said I wasn't scared. I didn't say it was true." A low chuckle escaped him, the first time she had heard him laugh. The sound transformed his face, softening the hard angles. "Courage is not the absence of fear," he said. "It is action despite fear." They stood in silence for a moment, the babbling creek the only sound between them. "Why are you helping us?" Sarah finally asked. "You could have attacked our homestead, taken revenge." Swift River's expression grew solemn. "My people have seen too much death. The white man's government sends soldiers who do not distinguish between tribes who want peace and those who want war. I seek a different path." "As do I," Sarah admitted. She tucked the stone buffalo into her pocket. "I will do as you've asked." Swift River nodded, seemingly satisfied. There is a stand of cottonwoods 2 miles north where the calf was killed. You will know the place by the blood on the rocks." He mounted his horse again. 3 days, woman of courage. After that, I cannot hold back the young warriors who demand justice." As he prepared to ride away, Sarah called out, "My name is Sarah, Sarah Mitchell." Swift River paused, regarding her with an unreadable expression. "Sarah," he repeated as if testing the sound of it on his tongue. Then he was gone, disappearing into the tall grass like a spirit. That evening, Thomas returned in a foul mood. The trading had gone poorly, and the settlement was buzzing with rumors of increased Comanche activity in the region. Army patrol came through warning everyone to be on alert, he said, as he wolfed down the stew Sarah had prepared. Said they found a homestead burned out 20 miles east, families slaughtered. Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she set down her spoon. "Did they say which tribe was responsible?" Thomas snorted. "Does it matter? Indians are Indians. Can't trust any of them." He eyed her suspiciously. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," she said carefully. "Not all tribes are hostile. The Shoshone have been peaceful." "Enough." Thomas slammed his hand on the table. "I won't hear you defending them. Remember what happened to the Crawfords last spring?" Sarah fell silent. The Crawford massacre had occurred before they arrived, but everyone in the territory knew the story. It was used to justify every act of violence against the native peoples, regardless of which tribe had been involved. That night, as Thomas slept, Sarah lay awake, the stone buffalo clutched in her palm. She had a decision to make, one that might determine whether they lived or died. 3 days, Swift River had said. 3 days to honor a sacred spirit and prevent bloodshed. As dawn broke, Sarah rose quietly. She gathered cornmeal from their dwindling supplies and a small pouch of tobacco Thomas kept for trading. She left a note saying she was gathering herbs and would return by midday, then set out northward, following the creek. The morning was cool and clear, the vast Montana sky stretching endlessly above her. Sarah found herself breathing more freely the farther she got from the cabin, from Thomas's anger and fear. She wondered briefly when she had stopped feeling like her husband's partner and started feeling like his prisoner. She found the cottonwood stand easily enough. The rocks beneath one tree were indeed stained dark with dried blood. Sarah knelt beside them, removing the stone buffalo, the cornmeal, and the tobacco from her pockets. "I don't know the proper words," she whispered, feeling foolish but determined. "But I offer these gifts in respect for the spirit taken from this place. I ask forgiveness for my husband's actions." As she arranged the items on the blood-stained rock, a shadow fell across her. Sarah's heart leapt to her throat as she spun around, expecting to find Swift River. Instead, she found herself face to face with Thomas, his expression twisted with rage. "So this is what you've been doing," he snarled, grabbing her arm roughly. "Consorting with savages behind my back." "Thomas, you're hurting me." Sarah tried to pull away. "I followed you," he said, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "Saw you talking with that Comanche by the creek yesterday. Heard everything." Sarah went cold. "Then you know he's offering us a way to make peace. A way for us to stay alive." Thomas's laugh was ugly. "Peace? They want submission. They want us gone." He kicked at the offering, sending the stone buffalo flying into the grass. "I won't bow to their heathen demands." "Then you'll get us both killed," Sarah shouted back, fear and frustration boiling over. "Is your pride worth our lives?" The crack of Thomas's hand across her face came as a shock. In 5 years of marriage, he had never struck her before. Sarah staggered backward, her hand going to her stinging cheek. "You're my wife," Thomas growled. "Your loyalty is to me, not some savage chief." Before Sarah could respond, the distinct sound of a bowstring being drawn taut froze them both. Swift River stepped from behind a cottonwood, arrow notched and aimed at Thomas's heart. Behind him were 3 warriors, similarly armed. "Your woman showed wisdom and respect," Swift River said, his voice cold as winter. "You show only the arrogance and violence that marks all your kind." Thomas reached for the pistol at his belt, but Swift River's warning was clear. "Touch it and die where you stand." For a terrible moment, Sarah thought her husband would choose death over reason. Instead, Thomas slowly raised his hands. "What do you want?" he asked, defeat finally entering his voice. Swift River's eyes flicked briefly to Sarah before returning to Thomas. The same as before. 5 horses. Now there will be no more chances. We don't have, Thomas began. I know where we can get them, Sarah interrupted, a desperate plan forming in her mind. The Hendersons have horses. They're leaving the territory next week. They might sell. Thomas stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. Swift River lowered his bow slightly. 3 days, he repeated. When the sun sets on the 3rd day, we will come for the horses. Or for blood. He motioned for Sarah to retrieve the stone buffalo from the grass. As she placed it back on the rock, adding the scattered cornmeal and tobacco, Swift River nodded in approval. Your husband does not deserve your loyalty, he said quietly, so only she could hear. Perhaps not, Sarah whispered back. But I gave him my word before God. Something like admiration flickered in Swift River's eyes before he and his warriors melted back into the forest, leaving Sarah alone with her fuming husband and a desperate plan that might save them both. The Henderson family had indeed been planning to leave Montana Territory, their dreams of frontier prosperity shattered by the harsh realities of drought, disease, and constant fear. When Sarah and Thomas arrived at their homestead, a wagon was already being loaded with their possessions. 5 horses? Jacob Henderson scratched his graying beard thoughtfully. That's most of our stock, Mitchell. I can pay $30 gold, Thomas said stiffly. The sum represented nearly all their savings, but Sarah had made it clear during their tense ride that they had no choice. Henderson glanced at his wife, who was watching from the porch with their 3 young children. Make it 40 and they're yours. Thomas's face darkened. Highway robbery. We'll take them, Sarah interrupted, stepping forward. 30 now, and I'll work the difference. I can help Mrs. Henderson with preparations for your journey. Martha Henderson brightened at this. Lord knows I could use the help, Jacob. The girl's offer is fair. And so the deal was struck. Thomas rode back to their homestead with 3 of the horses, while Sarah stayed behind to work off the remaining debt. For the next 2 days, she helped the Hendersons pack their life into a wagon, mended clothes, prepared meals, and listened to Martha's nervous chatter about their journey to Oregon. You could come with us, Martha suggested on the afternoon of the 2nd day, as they kneaded bread dough side by side. I've seen how your husband treats you, Sarah. Those bruises on your arm, and your cheek still shows the mark of his hand. Sarah's fingers stilled in the dough. He's not always like this, she said automatically, though the words felt hollow. The frontier changes people. It reveals people, Martha corrected gently. Hardship doesn't create cruelty. It uncovers what was always there, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. The wisdom in the older woman's words struck Sarah like a physical blow. Had the seeds of Thomas's violence always been there, dormant in the genteel Boston shopkeeper she had married? I made vows, Sarah whispered. So did he, Martha replied. To love and cherish. That night, as Sarah slept in the Hendersons' spare room, she dreamed of Swift River. In her dream, they rode together across an endless prairie, free and unburdened. She woke with the phantom sensation of wind in her hair and an ache in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. On the morning of the 3rd day, Sarah rode the remaining 2 horses back to her homestead. Thomas was waiting, pacing the yard like a caged animal. You're late, he snapped. The sun's already high. The work took longer than expected, Sarah replied, dismounting stiffly. The hours of labor had left her exhausted. Are the others ready? Thomas gestured to a makeshift corral where the 3 horses stood. 5 in total, the price of their safety. This is humiliating, Thomas muttered, giving in to their demands. It's surviving, Sarah countered. Sometimes that's all we can do. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Sarah busied herself preparing a meal. Thomas sat by the window, rifle across his lap, watching the plains for any sign of approaching riders. They'll come at dusk, he predicted grimly. Savages prefer the shadows. Sarah said nothing, continuing to stir the stew. Her silence seemed to agitate Thomas further. You've changed since we came here, he accused suddenly. Grown harder, defiant. Sarah met his gaze evenly. Perhaps I've simply grown up. Realized that the world isn't as simple as you made it seem in Boston. Thomas's face flushed. You've developed an unnatural sympathy for the red man. That Comanche chief, Swift River, Sarah supplied. I've seen how you look at him, Thomas continued, his voice low and dangerous. With respect, admiration even. Sarah set down her spoon. I respect anyone who chooses peace when war would be easier, who honors traditions and beliefs different from his own. She paused. Can you say the same, Thomas? The tension between them was broken by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Thomas jumped to his feet, rifle at the ready. They're coming, he hissed. Get behind me. Sarah ignored him, moving to the door instead. Outside, the setting sun painted the plains in hues of gold and crimson. 5 riders approached, Swift River at their lead. His warriors fanned out behind him in formation. They stopped at a respectful distance from the cabin. Swift River raised his hand in greeting, his eyes finding Sarah's immediately. We've come for what was promised, he called. Sarah stepped forward, ignoring Thomas's hissed command to stay back. The horses are ready, she replied, gesturing to the corral. Swift River dismounted, as did 2 of his warriors. The other 2 remained on horseback, bows ready, a precaution Sarah couldn't blame them for. As Swift River approached the corral to inspect the horses, Thomas emerged from the cabin, rifle lowered but still in his hands. His posture radiated hostility. Take them and go, he said curtly. Our debt is paid. Swift River ignored him, turning instead to Sarah. The horses are acceptable, he said. You have honored your word. There was a warmth in his eyes that made Sarah's heart beat faster. Will there be peace between us now? She asked. Swift River nodded. Between my people and you, yes. His emphasis on the final word was subtle but clear. His quarrel with Thomas remained. As the Comanche prepared to depart with the horses, one of the mounted warriors suddenly let out a warning cry. Sarah turned to see Thomas raising his rifle, aiming directly at Swift River's back. No! She screamed, lunging toward her husband. The shot went wild as she collided with Thomas, sending them both sprawling to the dirt. Thomas scrambled to his feet, eyes wild with rage. You betrayed me, he shouted, raising his hand to strike her. The blow never fell. Swift River moved with astonishing speed, catching Thomas's wrist in a grip of iron. For a moment the 2 men stood locked together, a tableau of opposing worlds. She saved your life, Swift River said coldly. Mine as well. You would repay her courage with more violence. Thomas struggled against his grip, but Swift River held firm. Sarah rose slowly to her feet, dust coating her skirts. Let him go, she said quietly. Please. Swift River released Thomas, who stumbled backward. You are not worthy of her, the Comanche chief said. Thomas spat on the ground. She's my wife. A wife is not property among my people, Swift River replied. She is a partner to be honored and respected. He turned to Sarah. Among the Comanche, a woman may choose to leave a man who brings her shame rather than honor. The implication hung in the air between them. Sarah felt as though she stood on the edge of a precipice, with 2 very different futures stretching out before her. You would take my wife? Thomas's voice was incredulous. After taking my horses, my pride, I take nothing, Swift River interrupted. I merely offer a choice. He extended his hand toward Sarah. Where there is courage, there should also be freedom. Sarah looked at the hand offered to her, strong, calloused, bearing the marks of a life lived close to the earth. Then she looked at Thomas, the man she had followed across a continent, whose dreams had become a prison for them both. I made vows, she whispered, more to herself than to either man. Vows broken cannot bind, Swift River said gently. Thomas lunged for his fallen rifle. This time, Swift River's warriors were quicker, arrows trained on the settler in an instant. Stop, Sarah commanded, her voice ringing with newfound authority. Enough violence, enough fear. She turned to Thomas. I'm leaving, Thomas. Not with him, not with anyone. I'm going to the Hendersons. They leave for Oregon tomorrow. Thomas's face contorted with disbelief. You can't. I can, Sarah interrupted. And I will. Stay here if you wish. Build your empire on stolen land, but you'll do it without me. She turned to Swift River, whose expression remained carefully neutral. Thank you for showing me what true strength looks like, she said softly, and what true respect feels like. Swift River nodded once, understanding passing between them. The Hendersons are good people, he said. "They treated my injured brother with kindness last winter when others would have let him die." Sarah wasn't surprised. Martha Henderson's compassion extended to all God's creatures, regardless of origin. "Will you escort me to their homestead?" she asked Swift River. "I fear the journey alone might not be safe." Her eyes flicked meaningfully to Thomas, who stood trembling with rage. "It would be my honor," Swift River replied. As Sarah gathered her few personal belongings from the cabin, Thomas made no move to stop her. Whether from shock or the watchful eyes of the Comanche warriors, he remained rooted to the spot, his dreams of frontier dominance crumbling around him. When Sarah emerged with a small bundle, Swift River helped her mount one of the horses his warriors had brought. "You won't survive without me," Thomas called after her, desperation replacing anger. "The frontier will break you." Sarah looked back at the small cabin that had never truly been a home. "Perhaps," she said, "but I'd rather break on my own terms than be slowly crushed on yours." As they rode away, Sarah, Swift River, and his warriors, the setting sun cast their shadows long across the Montana plains. For the first time since leaving Boston, Sarah felt the weight lift from her shoulders. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and hardship, but also possibility, freedom, and perhaps in time a new kind of happiness. The journey to Oregon took nearly 3 months. The Henderson wagon train joined with others heading west, forming a community of travelers bound by shared hopes and mutual protection. Sarah found herself welcomed into their midst, her skills as a healer, learned from her grandmother, and refined by necessity on the frontier, making her a valuable addition to the group. Swift River and his warriors had accompanied them to the edge of Comanche territory, ensuring their safe passage through lands where other tribes might have proved hostile. On the night before they parted ways, Swift River had spoken with Sarah alone by the campfire. "Your path takes you west," he had said, his dark eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "Mine must return to my people." "I understand," Sarah had replied, though her heart ached at the finality of his words. "Our worlds are too different." Swift River had studied her face in the firelight. "Perhaps, or perhaps they are not as different as others would have us believe." He had presented her with a gift, a small leather pouch containing sacred herbs, and the white stone buffalo that had started their unlikely connection. "For protection on your journey," he explained, "and to remember that courage can build bridges between worlds." Sarah had impulsively removed the silver locket from around her neck, a gift from her mother containing miniature portraits of her parents. "Then take this," she said, "to remember that not all who came from the East wish to conquer rather than understand." In that moment, something unspoken had passed between them, a recognition of what might have been in a different time, a different world. Swift River had taken the locket carefully, as if accepting not just a trinket but a responsibility. "Our paths may cross again," he had said, not as a mere comfort, but as a genuine belief. "I will watch for you on the horizon," Sarah had responded. Now 6 months later, Sarah stood on the porch of her small cabin in the Willamette Valley of Oregon Territory. The Hendersons had settled nearby, and Martha had become like a sister to her. The valley was lush and green, so different from the harsh Montana plains, with towering forests and abundant water. The local Kalapuya people maintained peaceful relations with the settlers, trading goods and knowledge that helped the newcomers adapt to the unfamiliar environment. Sarah had established herself as a midwife and healer, combining her Eastern education with traditional remedies learned from both her grandmother and the native women who had befriended her. Her small garden burst with medicinal herbs, and her cabin walls were lined with drying plants and carefully prepared tinctures. "Sarah, you have a visitor," Martha's voice called from the path leading to Sarah's door. Sarah wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside, shielding her eyes against the bright spring sunshine. A rider was approaching, leading a pack horse laden with goods. Something about his silhouette against the sky made her heart skip a beat. As the rider drew closer, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The straight-backed posture, the fluid way he moved with his horse rather than on it, she would recognize it anywhere. Swift River dismounted gracefully, looking much as he had when they parted, though his attire had changed. He wore buckskins and a cotton shirt clearly obtained through trade, with his long hair braided and adorned with a single eagle feather. The cavalry jacket was gone, replaced by a vest beaded with intricate patterns. "You found me," Sarah whispered, hardly believing her eyes. Swift River's familiar smirk appeared, softening into a genuine smile. "I said our paths might cross again." Martha, ever perceptive, quietly excused herself, leaving them alone. "How is this possible?" Sarah asked, gesturing for him to join her on the porch. "Comanche territory is hundreds of miles from here." Swift River's expression grew more solemn. "Much has changed. The white man's government continues to push my people onto smaller lands. Many Comanche bands have surrendered, accepting life on reservations." He paused. "I could not." "So you came west," Sarah concluded. He nodded. "I traveled with a small group of my people who refused the reservation. We joined with Shoshone cousins for a time. Then I continued alone." "To find me?" Sarah couldn't keep the hopeful note from her voice. "To find a place where a man might live with dignity, according to the old ways," he corrected gently. "Finding you, that was a hope I carried, but did not expect to fulfill." Sarah studied him, noting the new lines around his eyes, the weariness beneath his dignified bearing. He had traveled a great distance, not just in miles, but in spirit. "And now that you've found me?" she asked softly. Swift River reached into his shirt and withdrew a familiar silver locket. "I carried this across mountains and rivers through storms and danger. I came to return it to its rightful owner." Sarah made no move to take it. "It was a gift, as was this." Swift River produced the white stone buffalo from a pouch at his waist. "Yet I bring it back to you as well." "Why?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "Because some gifts are meant to be shared, not merely possessed." His dark eyes held hers. "I have thought of you often, Sarah Mitchell. Of your courage, your wisdom, your kind heart." Sarah felt warmth spreading through her chest. "And I have thought of you, Swift River. Of your honor, your strength, your willingness to seek peace when others chose war." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, the spring breeze carrying the scent of Sarah's herb garden around them. Then Swift River spoke again, his voice carrying a new vulnerability. "The world is changing quickly. The old ways are fading like mist before the sun. I have seen enough to know that those who cannot adapt will perish." He gestured toward the valley spread out before them. "This place, it holds promise, room for new beginnings." Sarah's heart quickened. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I am tired of being defined by others. As a chief, as an enemy, as a savage." His voice took on a bitter edge at the last word. "I wish to be known simply as a man, judged by his actions and his heart." "You will always be more than simply a man to me," Sarah said gently. Swift River took her hand, an intimate gesture that would have been unthinkable when they first met. "The Kalapuya have offered me a place here. Their chief remembers when his people face the same threats mine face now. He understands what it is to seek refuge." "And you've accepted?" Hope bloomed in Sarah's chest. "I told him I must speak with a certain stubborn white woman first." That hint of a smirk returned. "One who once claimed I did not frighten her." Sarah laughed, the sound bright in the clear air. "I was terrified that day." "As was I," Swift River admitted, surprising her. "Not of your husband's gun, but of the change I saw coming. For my people, for myself." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Change isn't always loss. Sometimes it's growth." "Like a seed becoming a tree," Swift River agreed, glancing at her garden. "Or two people from different worlds finding common ground," Sarah added softly. Swift River's expression grew serious. "The path I propose would not be easy. There would be those who disapprove, who seek to divide us." "There always are," Sarah replied. "But I learned something important from you, Swift River. Courage is not the absence of fear, but action despite it." He smiled, a full smile that transformed his face. "You remember my words." "I remember everything," Sarah said, including the feeling that somehow our stories were meant to intersect. Swift River stood, pulling her gently to her feet. "Then perhaps they are meant to continue together as well." He held out both the locket and the stone buffalo in his palm. "A bridge between worlds," he said. What was given separately now returned together. Sarah covered his hand with hers, enclosing the symbols of their shared journey. "Stay," she said simply. Help me build something new here. Something that honors both our pasts while creating a future neither of us could have imagined alone. Swift River's answer came not in words, but in the gentle press of his lips against her forehead, a gesture of respect, affection, and promise. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the Willamette Valley in the same golden hues that had illuminated their first meeting on the Montana plains, Sarah and Swift River stood together on the porch of her small cabin, their shadows stretching out before them, no longer separate but intertwined. Behind them lay worlds of difference and difficulty. Before them stretched a path unmarked and uncertain. But between them now existed something stronger than the forces that would divide them: understanding, respect, and a love that had taken root against all odds, like a rare flower blooming in the most unlikely of places. I am no longer a chief, Swift River said quietly. That life is behind me. Here, I can be simply the man I choose to be. And who is that? Sarah asked, looking up at him. He considered for a moment. My mother called me Tabe before I earned my warrior name. It means sun in our language. Tabe, Sarah repeated, savoring the sound. A new name for a new beginning. As twilight descended on the valley, two figures stood framed in the doorway of a simple cabin. Not Comanche chief and settler's wife, but simply Tabe and Sarah, two souls who had traversed vast distances, both physical and spiritual, to find in each other not just companionship, but home.